Walk onto almost any American motorcycle dealership right now, and you're standing on top of a problem the industry doesn't want to talk about out loud. New bike inventory across the U.S. cruiser and touring segment is sitting on showroom floors for an average of more than 160 days, and in some regions, that number is closer to 200. Compare that to the 60 to 90 days that was considered healthy back in 2022, and you start to understand why sales managers are quietly desperate. These 7 bikes are the ones sales managers pray you'll walk in and ask about. Not because they're bad, because they've been sitting so long that the floor plan interest is eating the dealership alive, and moving one of these units out the door, even at a loss on paper, is a win. One of the 7 you're about to see is a brand new premium cruiser from a European manufacturer, and dealers are discounting it harder than any leftover Japanese unit on the lot. I'm not going to name it yet. What I will tell you is that the number 1 bike on this list has an average dealer markdown so aggressive that when I first pulled the transaction data, I checked the source 3 times before I believed it. And at the very end of this video, I'm going to hand you the 3-question script that turns a bike that's been sitting on a lot for 300 days into your bike out the door for numbers the sticker never suggested were possible. Stay with me, because the middle of this list changes what you think you know about who's really hurting right now. The reason this is happening isn't complicated, but it's rarely explained honestly. After the supply squeeze of 2020 and 2021, dealers ordered aggressively going into 2022 and 2023, expecting demand to keep climbing. It didn't. Interest rates climbed instead, and the buyer who used to walk in and finance a $28,000 bike over 72 months suddenly saw a payment quote that made him pause. That pause turned into a walkout. Multiply that walkout across every dealership in the country, and you get what Cycle World and industry inventory trackers have been documenting for over a year, a slow-motion glut that nobody wants to call a glut. According to KBB and NADA depreciation data, several current model cruisers are already trading below their expected 12-month residual value, meaning the bike lost more money sitting still than it would have if somebody had ridden it 10,000 miles. J. Power dealer sentiment surveys confirm what the numbers show. Floor plan pressure is now the single biggest stressor on independent motorcycle retailers. So how did I pick these 7? 3 filters. Average days on lot above the segment median. A verified gap between advertised MSRP and real out-the-door transaction price of at least 12%. And a model year carryover, ratio high enough that dealers are still holding 2024 units, sometimes 2023, while the 2025 freight is already sitting behind them in the back lot. And the bike sitting the longest right now isn't the one you'd guess. Before I name number 7, think about the buyer who walks into a dealership looking for a full dress bagger under $18,000. He's not shopping brand loyalty. He's shopping capability per dollar. And there's a Japanese bagger that has quietly become almost impossible for dealers to move. Not because it's flawed, but because the demographic that would have bought it new 10 years ago is now buying it used at auction for half the price. Who is this bike really for in 2025? And why has the answer to that question gotten so narrow? Kawasaki Vulcan 1700 Vaquero ABS. Number 7 is the Kawasaki Vulcan 1700 Vaquero ABS. The platform is old. The 1700cc V-twin traces its architecture back over a decade. But the bike is honest. It makes real torque low in the rev range, the fairing does its job on the interstate, and the ergonomics don't punish a taller rider the way some competing baggers do. So why is it sitting? Because the buyer walking in for a Japanese bagger under $20,000 is walking in with the used market open on his phone. He sees a 2018 Vaquero with 9,000 miles for $10,500, and the new unit on the floor at $17,999 MSRP suddenly looks like a math problem he doesn't want to solve. Dealers know this. That's why the real transaction price on this bike is drifting closer to $15,000 out the door in several regions. And in end-of-quarter windows, I've seen it go lower. What happens when you finance a bike that's already depreciated $3,000 before you turn the key? That's the question the salesman won't raise, and it's the one you need to raise for yourself. This bike fits a very specific rider, someone who values proven reliability over the newest electronics, who plans to keep it 7 to 10 years, and who's not going to feel emotionally shortchanged when his neighbor rolls up on something with adaptive cruise control. If that's you, this is a bike you can steal right now. If it's not, you're about to see 6 reasons why this list only gets more interesting. But the next bike takes the same story and pushes it further into uncomfortable territory. Because when a manufacturer builds a cruiser this powerful, this well-engineered, and it still can't find a home, the problem isn't the machine. The problem is the market moved, and nobody told the marketing department. And the buyer who figures that out first is the one who walks out with a nearly new muscle cruiser for a price that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. Suzuki Boulevard M109 RBO SAS. Number 6 is the Suzuki Boulevard M109 RBO SA, a 1,783cc V-twin, one of the largest displacement production cruiser engines ever built, wrapped in a blacked-out aesthetic that in 2011 looked like the future. In 2025, it looks like a specific kind of nostalgia, and dealers are paying for it. MSRP on this bike sits around $15,499, but the real transaction price in aging inventory has been drifting into the low $13,000s and sometimes lower. Why can't dealers move a bike this capable? Because the muscle cruiser segment as a category has shrunk. The buyers who wanted brute displacement moved to touring or moved to used. The buyers who want new, want technology, traction control modes, ride modes, connectivity, and this platform doesn't offer that. What do you tell a customer who wants a modern cruiser and you're pointing him at a design that predates his current phone by 3 generations? The salesman doesn't have a clean answer, but here's the twist. For the rider who actually knows what he wants, straight-line torque, a clutch feel that hasn't been replaced by a computer, and a chassis that has been debugged over more than a decade of production, this bike is one of the most underpriced pieces of hardware in the segment. The dealer isn't hiding a problem. He's holding a bike the market forgot. What would it feel like to buy something that's already been depreciated for you by the market and ride it for 50,000 miles without a note owed on it? That question is the entire pitch, and it leads directly into a bike where the story stops being about aging Japanese metal and starts being about an American brand that dealers genuinely didn't expect to be sitting on. Indian Chief. Number 5 is the Indian Chief in its base and bobber configurations. This is where the list gets uncomfortable for people who assumed only Japanese leftovers were bleeding on the floor. The current Chief is, objectively, one of the best pure cruisers Indian has ever built. The Thunderstroke 116 makes serious torque, over 120 lb-ft, and the minimalist design language landed cleanly with the design press. So why is it sitting? Positioning. Indian's marketing pushes hard on the Chieftain, the Challenger, and the Roadmaster, the touring machines that command higher margins. The base Chief gets less air cover, and the buyer walking into an Indian dealership with cash in hand often gets steered toward the bigger bikes. Meanwhile, the base Chief at $14,999 MSRP sits. Real transaction prices have drifted to $12,500 and lower on 2024 carryover units. Is Indian's problem that they built too good a base model and gave dealers no reason to sell it? That's exactly what several regional dealer principals have said off the record. If you want an American cruiser with real torque and a design that hasn't chased a trend, this is the moment. But the next bike on this list is going to test whether you trust the brand more than you trust the numbers. Because we're about to look at a Harley that's aging on the floor, and it's not the one anybody expected. Before we get to that Harley, one honest note. If you're seriously considering walking onto a lot to buy a bike that's been sitting for months, the smartest $40 you'll spend before you sign anything is on a verified VIN and history report, the kind that shows exactly when the bike was delivered to the dealer, whether it's a genuine carryover unit, and whether it's been on and off multiple dealer floors. I've linked the service I use in the description. It has paid for itself for me twice, once when a new unit turned out to have been swapped between 2 dealerships and had a suspicious service record. We're 2 bikes away from the European surprise I promised at the top, and I want you walking onto that lot armed. Harley-Davidson Heritage Classic. Number 4 is the Harley-Davidson Heritage Classic. Yes, Harley. And no, not the Street Glide, not the Road Glide. Those still move, even with pressure. The Heritage Classic is a different story. MSRP sits in the neighborhood of $21,999 depending on color, and carryover units are quietly stacking. Why? The Heritage is caught between 2 buyers. The traditional softail buyer who wanted a classic look has increasingly moved to a used Fat Boy or a used Deluxe because the used market is flooded and pricing is aggressive. The newer buyer who wants a modern Milwaukee 8 platform is choosing a bagger because for a few thousand more, he gets fairing, storage, and a stereo. So the Heritage sits in the middle, and the middle is exactly where inventory dies. What does it mean when even Harley, the brand with the strongest emotional pull in American motorcycling, can't sell a bike this good at full sticker? It means the buyer holds more leverage than he thinks. Real transaction data on 2024 carryover Heritage Classics shows a delta of 15% or more off MSRP is regularly achievable in end-of-quarter windows. Are you willing to be the buyer who asks for it when everybody else is too intimidated by the brand to try? That's the question the next 3 bikes are going to force you to answer. Quick check-in, because the top of this list is where it gets interesting. If you walked onto a dealer lot tomorrow with cash in hand, which of these first 4 would you drive home? Drop it in the comments, I read them, and the pattern of what riders actually pick versus what dealers push is telling. The European surprise is coming up next, and you're going to see why dealers are almost begging on that one. Harley-Davidson Pan America 1250. Number 3 is the Harley-Davidson Pan America 1250. This one hurts, because the bike is genuinely good. The Revolution Max 1250 engine makes 150 horsepower, the chassis is more capable than the marketing led anybody to believe, and journalists at outlets like Cycle World and Motorcycle.com put it in serious conversation with established adventure platforms. So why is it on this list? Wrong buyer pool. The Harley faithful didn't want an adventure bike. The adventure buyer didn't trust Harley to build one, and in the middle of that gap, the Pan America sits, often in single digits of annual sales at individual dealerships. MSRP on the base is around $17,999, and real out-the-door numbers on aging units have drifted well below that. What happens to a bike that was designed to open a new segment when neither the old buyers nor the new buyers show up? It becomes one of the best value adventure platforms on the American market for the buyer who doesn't care about the badge war. That buyer exists. He's just rare. And rare buyers are exactly who dealership managers are hoping walk through the door before the next quarter closes. Which brings us to a bike where the badge is supposed to matter most, and it hasn't been enough to save it. Harley-Davidson Sportster S. Number 2 is the Harley-Davidson Sportster S. The Revolution Max 1250T engine, 121 horsepower, a chassis that redefined what Sportster even meant when it launched, and it's sitting. Why? Because the traditional Sportster buyer, the one who wanted an air-cooled 883 or 1200 that felt like the Sportster his older brother rode, never bought into the reinvention. The new buyer conquest that Harley hoped for happened, but not at the volume they needed. So the bike sits, and the discounts get real. MSRP is around $16,999. Transaction data on aging units has been drifting into the low $14,000s. And in end-of-quarter negotiations, I've seen numbers below that. What do you do when Harley builds the most technically advanced Sportster in the model's history, and the buyer base rejects it on principle? You wait. You wait until the dealer is desperate, and you walk in with the negotiation script I'm about to hand you at the end of this video. And the number 1 bike on this list has an average discount so large I had to verify it 3 times. BMW R8, number 1. And this is the European surprise I promised at the top, is the BMW R18. The bike German engineering built to challenge American cruiser dominance, powered by an air and oil-cooled 1,802cc boxer twin producing 91 horsepower and roughly 116 lb-ft of torque. On paper, this bike should have been a serious threat. In the showroom, it has become one of the most heavily discounted premium cruisers in the American market. MSRP on the base R18 starts around $16,995. But real out-the-door transaction data on aging units has been drifting into the low $13,000s, and in some cases, on 2023 and 2024 carryover. Dealers have been letting units go for $5,000 to $7,000 off sticker just to move them off the floor plan. Why? Because the American cruiser buyer, when he walked into a BMW dealership, was often already a BMW customer, looking at a GS or an RT. The pure cruiser buyer walked into Harley or Indian and stayed there. So BMW built a genuinely well-engineered cruiser and discovered, expensively, that engineering isn't the same as cultural fit. Here's the honest breakdown. The R18 is a legitimately impressive machine. The Boxer engine is a piece of industrial art. The build quality is what you'd expect from BMW. Long-haul comfort on the touring variants is competitive with anything in the segment. For the rider who wants a cruiser but doesn't want to buy into either American cruiser tribe, this is the bike, and it may be the single best pure value in premium cruisers on the American market right now. What does it feel like to walk into a dealership and buy a bike the market rejected at a price the market can't defend? For a small number of riders, that's exactly the pitch that turns this into the bike of a lifetime. So how do you actually buy one of these bikes cheap? Here's the 3-question script I promised you at the top. Question 1. Ask the salesman, Verbatim, how many days has this specific VIN been on your floor plan? You want a number, not a range. If he can't or won't tell you, that's information. Anything over 180 days means the dealership is bleeding interest on that unit every single day, and that pain is your leverage. Question 2. Ask, is this a prior model year carryover? And if so, what is your holdback and manufacturer support on moving it before the next quarter closes? Most buyers never ask this. Manufacturers regularly offer dealers cash incentives to clear aging units. That money exists. You just have to ask. Question 3. And this is the one nobody uses. Ask, what is your out-the-door number if I close today, and what is your out-the-door number if I close at the end of this quarter? The gap between those two numbers is the truth of how much room the dealer really has. Time your visit for the last week of March, the last week of June, the last week of September, and especially the last week of December. Watch for freight and setup charges. Those are the most negotiable line items on the invoice, and dealers use them as padding. Refuse dealer-added accessory packages you didn't ask for, and walk out on any bike that carries a market adjustment markup. That's a signal the dealer doesn't understand the market he's operating in. One more thing before I let you go. If you're actually going to walk onto a lot this weekend, the tool that goes in the truck with you is a solid pre-purchase inspection checklist and a small OBD2 diagnostic reader compatible with modern motorcycles. I've linked the exact inspection guide and the scanner I use in the description. Between those two tools and the 3-question script, you're walking in with more preparation than the average buyer and more than a few of the salesmen you'll be sitting across from. There's a companion list to this one already in production. The 7 motorcycles dealers can't keep in stock, the exact opposite side of the market. One of them is currently averaging under 10 days on the lot before it sells, and the numbers on that bike tell a completely different story about where American motorcycling is actually heading. And here's the part that's going to bother some of you. One of the bikes flying off the lot right now is the same brand as our number one today.